This is the story of how a film that took 2.5 years to finish, shot on $23,000 Australian with a crazy crew in 13 days, went from 1,000 subscribers to 20,000 in 3 weeks, and what it actually cost to make it happen. A few years ago, I made a mini-series called There Is No Antimemetics Division, an adaptation of an SCP Foundation story that I became obsessed with. Those numbers in the hook, they're real. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what each one of them cost me. Not just financially, but in time, in stress, in the gap between the film I imagined and the film I actually made. But to understand the cost, you first have to understand the obsession, because the obsession is what makes a filmmaker do insane things with very little money. When I first read Antimemetics on the SCP Foundation website, I was looking through the tales section, filtering by ratings. These stories just appear. And what hit me immediately wasn't that it was like scary or visceral or full of monsters. It was more of a cosmic horror, Lovecraftian. A concept so strange and so novel that I'd never seen it adapted before. The idea of anti-memes. Things that you can't remember, things that eat your memory just by existing. And I thought, this is brilliant. This is something that I have to make. But it wasn't just the story that grabbed me, it was the structure. Someone had written this as a cohesive narrative. There are acts, chapters. It felt like a film already. Like I could see it broken down into episodes, but also as one complete experience. And when I started imagining where I would shoot it, what it would look like, how I would pull it together, something kind of clicked. And I thought, I can do this. I don't know how, but I think I can do this. Now, I need to be clear about something. In my head, and in every filmmaker's head, you have unlimited money. In my head, this was $100 million production. Full crew, multiple locations, all the time in the world. But I already knew, and you always know, that it will never look the way it looks in your head. And that's fine. That's filmmaking. You have the fantasy in your head, and then you have to figure out what you can to actually make it with what you have. What I had was very little. I had a budget of $15,000 that became 23 in a blink of an eye. And I only had like 13 days to shoot, essentially almost like 2 weeks with barely any days off. I had camera crew of 3 people and I didn't have a proper first AD, which meant I was doing almost everything myself. The directing, the producing, the sorting, the logistics, even some of the catering. And I was stressed. Actually stressed. I remember I got like dermatitis from the stress, skin rashes from the pressure of doing way too much. And I had a lot of volunteers who, they were great, but sadly had little experience at the time. And the only experienced people at the start were me and my DOP, Alistair. Everyone else was learning as we went. But then something happened that changed everything. I was looking for a production designer, and I seen someone's work on another film, Joseph Tiernan, and it was phenomenal. So I reached out to him, I sent him the script, and I told him, look, we don't have much budget, but I believe in putting as much money as possible in front of the camera. Production design is one of the most important jobs on a film, and it's how the audience believes in the work. And I would rather spend the money on production design than on a fancy camera equipment. And he read the script, and he said yes. And here's the thing, he offered to do it for free. He has some time between jobs and he wanted to be a part of it. I was like, what the fuck? That's incredible. That he had only one request. He wanted a workshop to work in so that he could prep everything properly. And he wanted me to make sure that there was lunch for his team, even on shoot days. And I was like, that's fair. You know, that's more than fair. What Joseph brought to the film, what he brought on set, I still can't quite believe. I remember on the first day, there is this scene where Paul threw the phone to Alistair Gray. And so I turned around to grab the phone as a prop. And Joseph was standing there with that box, a box full of phones, 12 phones or something like that, all different styles already. And I could just choose the one I liked. It wasn't just the production design. It was the way that he managed the people. It was the system that he put in place. And in that moment, I was like, this is it. Without Joseph on this project, this series, it would have looked cheaper and worse. He changed what was possible with the money that we had. So let's talk about how we actually built this thing. Because before a single frame was shot, there were decisions that usually nobody ever sees, made in rooms and on calls that defines everything. So let me walk you through them. The first one, obviously, was casting. Marion Wheeler is the heart of the Antimemetics Division. She carries the first half of the story almost entirely on her own. She's not warm, she's not there to be liked. She's stern, sharp, and operating at a level of intellectual intensity that basically isolates her from almost everyone around her. And she has this enormous weight, being the only person who truly understands the scale of what the Foundation is dealing with. Getting Marion wrong would have killed the film before it started. So we auditioned a lot of people, and I had a very specific image in my head. Not physically, but energetically. I knew what Marion felt like, and I was waiting for someone who felt the way on tape. You believe immediately that this woman runs the department and doesn't flinch. But underneath, if you looked at it, there's like a fragility, a tiredness, something that said this person has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. And to me, that's Marion Wheeler. Exactly.
What sprang off the page was just how cool Marion Wheeler was. And smart, really clever. And it was really exciting that she was written in that way and solved problems and was a leader. That really attracted me straight away, and got to say some pretty cool lines. You know what was really cool? It was really liberating to not really worrying about being likable or if Marion is going to be liked. Like, she just does not give a shit because there's way more important things. And so I was just like, yep, let's do that.
What she said about Marion not caring about being likable, that's exactly right. Marion doesn't have time for likable. She has a job to do in a universe that is actively trying to make her forget she's doing it. And I think that freedom was liberating for Tanya. You know, she didn't have to make the audience love her. She just had to be right. The second decision was DOP, or the director of photography, and that one was never a question. Alistair has been my collaborator for years. He shot my previous SCP short film, 10,000 Years. He's probably the single person I have spent the most time talking about the SCP Foundation, about Antimemetics, about the visual world we wanted to build, and we've worked together commercially and helped each other out on personal projects. He was always going to shoot this film.
And I remember having a million conversations with you about, I know this is our budget, but let's try and look at what we want and then see what we can get for our budget, rather than sort of just settling for things that are affordable or accessible. Yeah, that was pretty much obsession for about 3 weeks until it was finished. It was great because it was an aesthetic that I really liked anyway, because it was something that both you and I think, really liked the feeling of, the aesthetic, that sort of mixed technology. And I think at the time when we were talking about it, Loki had also come out as well. And that was another one that was talking about that sort of things that are styled from an old era, but are more contemporary or even, future forward technology.
That conversation, the one Alistair is describing, we had it like 100 times. And the key reference we kept coming back to wasn't actually a film. It was a video game. And I'm pretty sure you guys can guess. It was Control by Remedy Entertainment. If you haven't played it, it's set inside a brutalist government building that investigates paranormal phenomena. The production design is extraordinary. Every room feels like architecture itself can be threatening. It's dark, contrasty, bright pools of light cutting through shadows, old technology, analog dial, CRT monitors, filing cabinets, everything existing alongside something completely otherworldly. I'm obsessed with that game. And not for the story, the story has its issues, but as a design world, it's one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen. And when I started imagining Antimemetics Division, that was the texture that I was seeing. That aesthetic also solved the practical problem. We didn't have the budget for grand, fully lit sets, these massive rooms, but we didn't need to. The dark frame was an asset.
It was one of those things where sometimes constraint is a good thing, and for us, with real limited equipment budget and crew to get through some quite ambitious things, we couldn't have these grand sets. So we could have what bright spots in the frame, and that led itself to us having production design do a huge amount of the lighting for us. Practical light are the main key lights in all of the frames, or most of the frames. It was it was amazing. And to be honest, without having Joe there, we couldn't have achieved the look we had with the budget that we had.
And that's exactly what happened. Joseph's production design wasn't just dressing the set, it was creating the lighting conditions. The O5 office was lit almost entirely by practicals, not big cinema lights, just the world they were standing in, doing what it will actually do. Constraint, it turns out, it's a visual language. We just didn't know that we were speaking it. The third decision was structural. On this one came out of a collaboration with my writer, Jenna Cosgrove. When we were adapting Antimemetics, we had to make hard choices about what to cut. The source material is quite dense, and the first 2 chapters have a specific problem when you translate them to screen. Chapter 1 is 3 people in a room talking about anti-memes, which is pure exposition. For SCP fans, it's gripping. For someone who never heard of the SCP Foundation in their life, it risks being 20 minutes of talking before anything actually happens. Chapter 2 is where the concept of anti-memes becomes real. You see it with Paul and Asnicar. You experience it. The decision Jenna and I landed on was to merge the two chapters. Take the exposition from chapter 1 and weave it through the experience of chapter 2. Instead of being told what anti-memes are and then shown what they do, you discover both at the same time. You learn the rules as you watch them being broken. And I think that was the right call. Sadly, it also meant, cutting some very cool lines from the source material, which I still regret, but that's the learning phase. The last thing I want to talk about in pre-production is locations, because at this budget level, locations aren't just backdrops, they're characters. We shot in Melbourne, Australia, and for the foundation corridors and lab spaces, the institutional, infrastructure of Site 41, we use Melbourne universities. You don't have to do much to make a university building feel like a secret government facility. The bones are already there. For the underground bunker sequences, the doors, the basement where the bomb is, we used a water treatment plant on the outskirts of the city. It's industrial, brutalist, functional in a way that felt completely alien, and I'll tell you more about what happened there shortly. We built the paper room in a studio. That's where Joseph's work really came onto its own. And for episode 2, we shot on a farm, which presented its own very specific set of challenges. On paper, we were ready. In reality, we had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. I want you to picture this. We're on a farm in rural Victoria, Australia. It's episode 2. It's Sunday. We have a full day of shooting ahead, including the most technically complex scene in the film. A character being physically corrupted by SCP-3125 with custom prosthetic work and a confrontation that needs to cover a lot of ground. That was the plan. My DP, Alistair, arrived the morning driving his van, and he pulled into the property and the engine died. The van had been running on fumes for the last stretch, and it made it just far enough to arrive before giving up completely. We were in the middle of nowhere, Victoria, It was a Sunday. Getting a mechanic out to fix it cost him $800 and took the entire day to find. And that was before we'd shot a single frame. Then when I was location scouting, I spotted a lake on Google Maps. Wide open water, beautiful light, exactly the kind of establishing shot that makes the scene feel cinematic. And I was like, let's go down there. Let's get the shot. So we loaded up the cars and started driving down the slope. But what happened is that I realized about halfway down that I had completely misread the terrain from Google Maps, and what looked like a gentle slope was a steep, muddy dirt road dropping sharply towards the water. If we went further down, we were never getting back up. And we turned around and carefully and slowly and terrifyingly, we lost over an hour to come back up, and that we couldn't afford to lose. And by the time we started shooting, we were already behind. The actor in the prosthetic scene was struggling with his lines, and we were burning through takes. And so Tanya was doing her scenes with a script reader because the other actor wasn't ready. The makeup artist was trying to apply the prosthetics while we film around the problem, and then turn around and I look over, and I had commissioned these custom prosthetics, spider legs, $1,000, these limbs that were meant to erupt from the character's body as SCP-3125 takes hold. They were built for us, custom made, and they looked amazing in photos. On the actual actor, in the actual light of that day, they looked like two giant dildos glued to his chest coming out. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it was like a disaster. So we made the decision, let's just go handheld, shaky, disorienting, fast. Let's lean into the horror rather than trying to show it clearly, because it's definitely not gonna work. And so we figure out the rest in post, and Alistair picked up the camera and we started moving. No tripod, no marks, no careful composition, just the two of us, a field in Victoria, and whatever we could get before the light died. And yes, we were running out of light, so we were looking at the sun on the horizon going down by the minute. And somehow we got it. There's a moment in filmmaking where the plan falls apart and something else take over. It's not planning, it's not preparation. I think it's just instinct. It's just two people who trust each other completely, making decisions in real time.
I would say pick a frame, any frame that you look at and think about what could have gone wrong in it, then it probably did. Can I be, really honestly, I can't believe that you pulled anything together there at all. I literally, on that day, I was like, I will be reshooting this.
But I'm proud that we proved them wrong in the edit. But I want to tell you about a different day. The water treatment plant location for the underground bunker sequence. One of the key scenes require getting the prop bomb, the large, heavy, purpose-built bomb, down to the lowest level of that facility. We asked ahead of time, will the bomb fit in the elevator? Because we needed to bring it down. Yes, sure. And we were like, did you actually measure, the elevator? Yeah, we'll be all right. Don't worry, mate. It did not fit in the elevator. And we're standing there with a bomb that doesn't fit anywhere, 20 meters of vertical space between us and where we need to be. Obviously running out of time, we only have 8 hours there, and Joseph looked up and there was a crane, like a full industrial crane directly above the hole we needed. So Joseph walked over to the site manager and he's like, can we use that thing? And the answer was yes. And so we crane the prop bomb, we lower it, and then we drop it 20 meters down into the bowels of the water treatment plant, because Joseph asked a question I wouldn't have thought to ask. I struggle with the burden of asking, and Joseph does not have that problem. And on that day, that willingness to just look up and ask, saved the entire schedule. And episode 3 wasn't spared from the chaos. What happened is at SCP-3125, which is supposed to be the containment room, we were inside there filming, and Tanya is just basically talking to herself, and she's listening to herself talking back. So we pre-recorded herself talking to the camera that then we're going to use in the monitor so she can listen to it. But it just felt a bit stale, and we couldn't quite figure out what to do. And she just decided, one long take. I'm gonna give you one long take, pure reactions, no coverage, no cutaways, just her face and everything Marion Wheeler was feeling uninterrupted. And she gave me that scene in a single take.
Yeah, there were quite a few points where we had to just do, well, that take is the good enough take. And let's move on. And we also compromised a bit on just coverage. Hey, I think that was a bit of a running theme, and I think it often is. It's just we'd love to get these shots to come at a certain pace, but we couldn't. So we compromise, and it's always a compromise. Look, I think we still sort of pulled it off.
That was the reality of almost every day. Compromise, move, get what you can. The film you make under constraint is definitely like a different film than the one you make with unlimited resources. Not worse, I would say just different. The urgency ends up in the performance, the improvisation ends up in the edit. You can't plan for that, but sometimes it's exactly what the film needs. Antimemetics Division is the film it is because of what we didn't have. But finishing the shoot was the easy part. We wrapped and then nothing for almost a year. This film didn't exist, and it's kind of my fault. I went back to Italy and left the film sitting on a hard drive for a long time. Not because the edit was hard, it's because I needed to stop. I came back to my hometown in northern Italy and tried to slow down, get back into this strange life that I left behind. And that took about a year. And then came the edit. The real work of post isn't the cutting, it's making peace with the film that exists and not the one that you imagine. For the score, I turned to my cousin, Jack Salzani. We've been making films together since we were 8. The brief I gave him was an astronaut on a remote space outpost alone is slowly developing Alzheimer's. Notes almost there and then not. Loops that start and then don't resolve. The musical equivalent of reaching for something on a shelf and finding your hand closing on empty air. And I would say that Jack got there. I think the music is one of the best things in the film. When everything was finally locked, I did what I always do. Put it on a USB stick, on a big TV, and watch it alone, beginning to end, in silence. And when I got to the finale, I actually cried. Not because it was perfect, by any stretch of the imagination. I know every flaw, every compromise, every moment where the limit is visible if you know where to look. But I cried because of everything the film contained. Every person who showed up, the van that broke down, the mud road, the prosthetics that didn't work, the crane, all of it somehow in the can. 2.5 years, done. I released Antimemetics Division, 1 episode per week in the premiere format, so I could be in the live chat while people watch it for the first time. And I think the chat during a premiere isn't just comments on screen. It's almost like being in a room, and the SCP Foundation community show up in a way I was not prepared for. Before Antimemetics, my channel had a couple of thousand subscribers, and when Antimemetics dropped, within a few weeks, it went to 20,000. 20,000 people say yes, more of this.
Away by the SCP community. We had some vulnerabilities around it because we know that it's not perfect. We know that it was, cobbled together. Only positive response has been, just so gorgeous. What is this community? It's amazing. Because it's so easy to point out faults and flaws, and especially on the internet, especially when it's in that sort of anonymous realm. And we know they're there, everyone can see them, they're there, but to just go, yeah, but good on you anyway, I think that's just been wonderful. Thank you to everybody for accepting me as in that role, which I knew there was pressure related to taking on, but I didn't realize how much. That's so incredible. It's really exciting.
That's the SCP Foundation community. That's who we made this for. Making this film taught me one thing above everything else. The right people change what's possible. Joseph and his production design, Alistair going handheld when the sun is coming down, Tanya giving me the scene a single take, Jack writing music for someone losing their memories. None of that happens if I'm doing it alone. And none of it happens if I'm not willing to reach out and say, I don't have much, but I believe in this, and see who says yes. Antimemetics was one of the best experiences of my life. And I am very glad that I got to share with you and the SCP Foundation community. If you're sitting on a script right now, if you've been sitting on it for like months or years, waiting for like better conditions, the film doesn't get made by waiting. It gets made by deciding in your body, not just in your head, that this thing is going to exist. You're going to lose an hour, on a mud road. You're going to look at a $1,000 prop and realize it looks completely wrong. You're going to have days where everything breaks at once, and you're going to make it anyway. Go and make your film.